Hi, and welcome to Chapter 1 of the Joyce podcast, When a Child Loses Their Innocence, based on a true story. Losing our innocence doesn't only mean what we think it means, the loss of one's virginity. No way. Losing our innocence can also happen by being exposed to a terrible life situation. A child seeing or hearing things that are too inappropriate or too mature for their minds can also rob them from their innocence. This is how I lost mine. To this day, I remember that evening so clearly, probably because it was the most traumatic event that took place during my younger years. I remember I just stood there, shivering, staring like a deer in headlights. I couldn't move. I watched as his soul left his body with such anger and aggression. He was dying right in front of me. I watched him flutter around, making noises I've never heard before. I was only 8 years old. I couldn't figure out if I was having a nightmare or if it was real. Which was it this time? Recalling my growing up days in Beirut, Lebanon comes with some terrible feelings and memories. Memories a child should never have to see, hear, or feel. And just because I was a child doesn't mean the memories will eventually disappear and fade away. Time will heal, they said. Find something to take your mind off it, they said. It's okay to cry and let it all out, they said. On the contrary, as a child, memories become bottled up deep inside our mind and are usually recalled, unexpectedly, in many different ways. Could be a sound, a smell, a picture, or sometimes for absolutely no reason at all. You just find yourself remembering things you really don't want to remember. And instantly, they would give me such bad feelings. Feelings of fear, worry, insecurity. I would eventually ward them away, but then the cycle started all over again. To this day, over 40 years later, there are still many triggers that can remind me of that vicious civil war. Some are so clear in my mind that I can actually relive them like it was just happening. But only in my mind, of course. They would haunt me, make me cry, make me scared to sleep, shower, or even just be alone. And yet nobody really knew. I just kept it all in. I would tell myself that the day would pass and something else will take my thoughts away. But again, unexpectedly, they would return to taunt me all over again. For years and years I fought through these traumatic memories. Memories of not knowing if we were going to get shot or blown up, if we will go hungry or be taken away from our parents, or die. Each day I wondered if today is the day we are going to die. I was only 8 years old. Can you imagine that? War is a really bad thing. That evening, all of a sudden, we began to hear a sound of gunfire outside our apartment. That wasn't anything new, but still, we would lay low and quiet down. My father told us not to touch the lights, as to not draw attention to the snipers outside shooting away at who knows what, and we would just listen to which direction the sounds of the whizzing bullets were going to determine how far or how long the senseless killing spree session would last, and we would hope and pray that we don't hear a loud explosion close by. Because if we did, then we knew. Well, it just wouldn't be a good thing. But instead, that evening, it was worse than any explosion I've ever heard. It was a single bullet shot that messed up my mind and caused me to lose my innocence. One bullet, and the chaos began. Someone in my house just got shot. We immigrated to Canada in 1976. I'll never forget the night we landed. Words cannot even begin to express the feeling I had inside me. I wanted to burst with excitement of being free and safe. No more whizzing bullets, explosions, no more uncertainty. Will we die today? No more screams and cries. No more worrying about lack of food and water. Is this a dream, or is this really true? Canada saved me, and that's what I believe, and I am so grateful. Immigrating to Canada had its challenges for me. New country, new language, new school, friends, new atmosphere, It definitely required some serious adaptation. Pretty much everyone who came within my presence had absolutely no idea what my mind had gone through over the past few years. And those early years are some of the most crucial years of child development. And yet, I just had to adapt. Alone, I had to figure things out. Of course, I had my loving and very caring family, but at a very young age, I realized that in the end, a human being is all alone. It's you and only you, your mind, your thoughts, your brain, and your control. At a very young age, I learned how to control my own thoughts because I realized that our thoughts are the very factors that make us feel and react the way we do when any situation arises. This realization is what has gotten me through my life until this very day. I realized that if I learned how to control my own mind, then I would be able to control my own mind, and whenever bad thoughts entered it, I would talk to myself, convince myself, and remind myself that I was in control. And I would then either divert my attention to something else or face the culprit and challenge it. And usually, I win. That evening, I saw a lot of blood. He was shot right in his head. I'll never forget what I was thinking silently to myself. Wow, I didn't know that there's so much blood in a person's head. At first, it seemed like a water spout turned on high, gushing out, but eventually it was like a broken sprinkler that just sputtered out water, as if the water pressure is low. Yep, I remember it so well. With my own eyes and my own ears, I saw and heard it all. The screaming, the panic, the chaos, and the blood. The blood that eventually traveled onto all of us and everywhere. I remember the red paisley-patterned velvety wallpaper was dripping with blood, and the Persian carpet at the front door was getting wetter and wetter as they tried to carry him to the door and down the stairs where, hopefully, the Red Cross ambulance would be. But don't hold your breath, because during the war it was just known that ambulances are not always available. They were just too busy. I couldn't make a sound. I remember a strong smell, a smell that I always related to as metal. I saw my dad hysterical, that one of his closest friends that he hadn't seen in a long time was dying in his arms. He dropped in for a visit, for a coffee, and just like that, his life is leaving him. My dad desperately tried to help him by putting pressure on the wound, hoping he can keep the blood in and try to save his life. My dad was completely covered in blood. Maybe he was shot too? I wasn't even sure who else was shot. Dad, are you going to die too? I looked around. Where's my brother? Where's my mom? I was so scared, so scared. Somebody please help me. During my teenage years, I found myself doing a lot of creative writing. Songs, poems, short stories. I actually still have them all saved in a box. I even had a diary going on for a while, but that didn't last too long. I began to discover that writing down my thoughts and feelings seemed to help me see things clearer. And if I can see things clearer, I can deal with them better. It was like a self-therapy session, a quiet time for me, myself, and I. There was a voice, always in my head, which I just figured was the voice of my thoughts. You know, like the voice of reasoning. And in time, I soon realized that this voice played such an important role in my thinking process. I began to pay more attention to it and listen to it. And I would ask it questions, and somehow an answer appeared in my head. Sometimes a foggy answer, but many times the right answer. I would suggest any of my fears or concerns, and a logical answer became an option as a solution rather than the usual emotional ones that often filled my head with fears and my eyes with tears. But the issue, or rather the problem, was that the logical answers always seemed to have a much more difficult path to the solution, and with more risks involved, while the emotional answer always seemed to be the simpler way. I'll just cry it out for a few days, and then I'll forget about it. Or I would say to myself, just be grateful that you have a job, even if you hate it. What will you do if you quit? Or, I really want to, but I'm just too afraid. The emotional way just seemed to be the easy way out, Simple. Sweep it under the carpet and forget about it. No risks or facing fears involved. Perfect. But not perfect. The emotional thoughts would just take over my thinking and control my actions, ruin my day and make me sad, scared, depressed, or just feel useless. I knew that the emotional answers held me back from achieving my goals, dreams, and desires. Why? Because it was becoming evident that choosing the easy path really never moved me forward. I knew I had so much potential, but I couldn't seem to break free from this pattern to reach my goals. It was fear of failing, fear of facing problems that could arise along the way, fear that I am too weak and afraid to take a different path. I began to realize that I was not in control of my own mind, thoughts, or actions the way that I should be. After all, it is my own mind, and who else is better to control it than myself? Meanwhile, that voice, always reminding me that I own my mind, I own my feelings, and I own me, and I must control me. And so I made a vow that I will change, that I will listen to that voice and push myself out of the comfort zone I was so comfortable in. And the beginning of change began. That evening, while I was standing there scared and shivering, I heard my mom's frantic screams. "Joyce, Joyce!" Instantly, my own frantic screams began. I was hysterical, screaming at the top of my lungs as if to let out my fears through my voice. I saw my mom rushing towards me with my brother in hand. I looked at my big brother, and he looked so afraid. My brother afraid? He was never afraid of anything. And to see him like that scared me even more. My screams continued. My mom, who just less than half an hour ago was in the kitchen preparing dessert to serve to our guest. She had such a worried look on her face. My mom, the strongest person I know, was not so strong that evening. She too was so afraid. I can't even imagine what was running through her mind. How worried she must be for us. She reached for my hand, grabbed it, and held it so tight as to never let it go again. We left through our front door, leaving the nightmare behind us, leaving the murder scene of an innocent man who died for no reason other than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. We left through the front door, leaving the stains, the filth, the dead body. We left to never ever return to our home again. Just like that, my room, my toys, my dresses, my dolls, my favorite bike, my friends, my best friend Rena, are all taken away from me. To this day, I've never been back to that place I once called home. Gone, just like that. And yet, the only thing that I couldn't leave behind was a vision of one of the most horrific scenes any human being can imagine. That vision haunted and invaded my mind for many years to follow. The next main event I remember vaguely was the ship we traveled on to get us to Cyprus. Cyprus was our first and only stop before we reached our new safe home. It was an approximate 12-hour boat ride away, and although I knew it was the beginning of a new freedom, not until we reached Canada and we see my aunt and uncle who had sponsored and freed us from this living in hell, not until I see them waving at us from the arrival lounge at Toronto Pearson Airport will I feel free. Cyprus was just a safety stop for me, a place to rest my head for a short while, a place to catch my breath. As I looked back, I could see the port of Beirut looking smaller and smaller as we got further and further away from it. I had no feelings. My little mind was just too overwhelmed. We were all a mess from the mess we left behind. That civil war lasted from 1975 to 1990 and resulted in over 120,000 deaths. It really destroyed humanity. It was ruthless and merciless. How did I ever survive this path of my life without too many consequences? My brother and I did not have a normal childhood. We collected bullets for fun. We had a collection of over 25 types of bullets, with the gunpowder still inside. We would be playing ball outside or flying a homemade kite or riding our bikes. And as soon as we heard the sounds of bullets, we would run for cover. I would then hear our mom calling, "Yalla, yalla, come home now. It's going to start again. It's going to rain bullets," she would say. Wow, even thinking about that today gives me the jitters. Kids, Come in the house because it's going to rain bullets. It sounds so unreal, but unfortunately, it's not. It's 100% real. Lebanon was famous for its tourism, culture, fashion, media, and delicious food. Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, is a hidden gem. It was once known as the Paris of the Middle East until that vicious war took over, destroying its heart and soul, its dignity and self-respect, destroying and displacing its people, stripping them of their own country, home, freedom, and forcing them to either flee for their lives or remain and face horrid conditions. However, nobody or nothing could destroy its natural beauty. For a winter experience, you can drive up to the mountain, where you'll find the famous cedar trees just a few hours away. It was so exciting to drive there. We would play in the snow for hours. Then, I remember, I would pile up as much snow on the car as I can and hope that when we reach home, there is still some snow left to show my friends, as proof that we went to the mountains. Or, on warmer days, we would drive to the beach with all our beach toys and enjoy the warm breeze of the air while swimming in the Mediterranean Sea. Those were happy days, safe days, and beautiful days. During the war, our drive was always nerve-wracking and unpredictable. We lived in a volatile time where anything can happen at any moment. Our outings would inevitably result in seeing something that is not pleasant. As an example, crossing a military checkpoint was the worst for me. I would see soldiers carrying all sorts of weapons and tanks loaded with machine guns. Sometimes I could hear my heart pounding as they ask a million questions before letting you through, if you're lucky. Another time while driving down the boulevard alongside of the rocky valley, we see multiple bodies, maybe 6 or 7, thrown over the railing, decomposing, smelling, and completely blown up from the scorching hot sun. Every bit of dignity and self-respect thrown along with them. It was truly unreal. I'll also never forget a time when we went for a walk along the boardwalk where we saw many people huddled together, looking at something, or rather, someone. We also had a look. A young girl with a bullet hole in her chest, just laying there in a pool of blood, dead for anyone to see. I often wondered what she went through before she got shot. And another time, when we came home from one of our drives, to find our mom's car destroyed by a random grenade, along with 4 other cars, some with people still inside them. No matter where you went, trouble was always looming, and the worst part was there was no place to run or hide. You just had to live through it. And this is how we lived, always terrorized. That evening we left our home with nothing in hand. We were all so distraught. We stayed at a family friend's home. They welcomed us with open arms. J.O.Y.C.E was my school friend, while our parents were very close friends. We were there for only a few days while we planned our next step to get us to Canada, or rather, out of Beirut. I'd lost my voice from all the screaming and shock. For days I was not able to speak at all. Of course, it really worried my mom, but this was no time for doctors or hospitals. Keep going, don't stop. We were sure that my voice will eventually return, and it did. That was the last time I ever saw my friend J.O.Y.C.E. Sadly, a few years later, as I was settling into a new life in Canada, I overheard my father tell my mother that J.O.Y.C.E, he had found a grenade on his way home from school, brought it into his room and was playing around with it, as a 10-year-old boy would. It exploded in his hands. I'll never forget my father's words to my mom. He said, "The explosion was so bad, J.O.Y.C.E had to be scraped off the wall." Oh my God, J.O.Y.C.E is gone. Scraped off the wall? How can my mind handle this now? I was 10 years old, and my fears returned all over again. That night, I cried all night. I shivered with fear. I woke up the next day. I couldn't speak. No voice. Luckily, we only experienced a couple of years of this terrible life, unlike others that had nowhere to run or hide. They had no choice but to continue facing the nightmare that awaited them each and every day wondering, will we die today? Throughout the first 4 years of our arrival to Canada, there were many wonderful adventures. Life was moving forward for me. I was building a life of hope, and I was beginning to feel confident with myself. We lived in an apartment in North York, Toronto. Both my brother and I were enrolled in school. My mother attended Seneca College to obtain her ECE, and my father, afraid to lose his land and assets, back in the war zone, felt the need to risk traveling back and forth for the sake of business. Every time he would leave, my anxiety level would rise. What if he gets shot and dies? And what if I never see him again? But for 4 years, this was the routine, until one day, just as my life was beginning to really settle, another disturbing shock out of nowhere smacked me across the face. I came home from school to find out that my father has left us to never return again. He left a note. He hated Canada. He just couldn't settle here. The note said a lot of things, but all I heard was, "I'm going and not returning." Gone forever, my dad? He left my mother to raise my brother and I alone. Really? Do I need this? Now I have to deal with the loss of a father. Why is this happening to me, I wondered. What have I done wrong? Nobody ever really realized the effect this had on me. Growing up without a father was very hard. I loved my dad. He loved me. But now he's gone. And the fact that he was alive, living on this earth, seeing the same sun and the same moon that I see day in and day out, yet knowing that I can't see him was even more difficult to deal with than if he was actually dead. Another blow to my short time on this earth. I was only 12. I was still fighting many emotions, memories, and fears that lingered in my mind. And now this? At 12, I hated my life. I'm 52 years old now, and a lifetime has passed since that horrible evening and my face-to-face with that evil war. However, today I'm a survivor. How did I do it? I did it on my own. No psychiatrists, no pills, no counseling. Maybe I could have used a bit of outside help. Maybe someone to talk with could have helped me heal a little bit faster. Maybe taking a pill a day could have helped me ease my pains and fears. But I didn't get any help. It was just me, myself, and that voice that was always with me. I knew that I was not alone. And as I got older, my faith also got stronger. Coming from a Christian home, we were always reminded to keep God in our hearts and minds, and we did. I began to realize that the voice I've been hearing in my head is God guiding me through my life, in good times and in bad. God's voice pushed me and told me that I have nothing to fear. It promised me to always stay with me and help me. It gave me the logical answers while allowing me to still feel the emotional feelings. And the more I listened and followed that instruction, the easier the path. That is how I did it. I listened and faced the challenges. It felt so good to be in control, and it felt so good to win. Our minds are so fragile and yet tough at the same time. And controlling any of your thoughts and actions start with yourself. Many bad experiences, especially as a child, create what I call invisible mind effects. You can't see them, can't touch them, but they are there. They can take over and be so destructive. They are powerful, controlling, and harmful. Reaching out and asking for help from anyone is really difficult because many people look for a physical problem to sympathize with others. But when it's a deep-rooted issue in your own mind, how do you really express to anyone how you feel on the inside when you look totally fine on the outside? It's so hard. Today, I'm a different person, and I'm able to control my emotions so well, resulting in a better and happier life. My mom, she also said, something good always comes from something bad, and that is true. My rough beginning to life has helped me build a stronger foundation for my future. It took years of learning that when I fall, I can always get back up, no matter what the situation. But it's I that has to want to get up. There is so many falls in our lifetime, some much harder than others, and we have to understand that this is how life is, up and down and up and down. We know this. We see this each and every day in our own lives and in the lives of others. Don't all of a sudden be surprised if something bad happens. We know it can at any time. Life is like a war, extremely unpredictable, very fragile, and beyond volatile. 1 minute you're drinking coffee, the next minute you have a bullet in your head. Just like that. But the war should never be against yourself. Find that voice. It's there. Listen to that voice. Believe in that voice. Believe that it's coming from a higher power. For me, it is God holding my hand and standing by me. Always. Find your voice and figure out who it is that is always with you, holding your hand. And let that voice guide you into the right path. It knows you and wants to help you. So you can be free. Free to control your emotions by thinking logically.